I'm driving in the van with most of the participants, and every participant is black or brown and comes from a low-income family. And I'm driving, and someone mentions something about like, oh, that's my dad in jail. And I, sort of naively asked, well, how many people have a close family member in jail, or who's in, serving time? And every one of them raised their hand in a van of like 12 kids. And so that sort of those combined experiences really, I think, sort of was the early part of what I know very much in my bones today, that the greatest injustice and unfairness in our society now is through the criminal justice system, and how, and we see it through mass incarceration. Just the numbers are astounding. We see how unfair the incarceration is, and how there's this presumption of dangerousness, as Brian Stevenson says, where that's just so embedded in our history that thinks it's okay to put people in cages when if they look differently or they came from a different family, they wouldn't be. And in fact, if I'm convinced that, I again grew up in a suburban neighborhood, and I'm convinced that if it was me or my friends or my family members that was happening to, it wouldn't be happening. And so it really is today's modern day civil rights movement. Like, I really think there's a parallel. So right now we would say, how did they have Jim Crow laws? How did they say that you had to go to a different bathroom if you were black or white, or a different water fountain, or you couldn't sit at a lunch counter, you had to sit in the back of the bus? That just seems so outrageous, and we could never fathom that happening in today's society. Well, I think we're going to look in 50 years, we're going to look at today and what we've been doing in mass incarceration, and look back both at the inequities, the racial bias, and we're going to say, how did we do that? Like, that was shame on us, just like we do back at Jim Crow. And when Katrina hit, it was a little bit over 400,000 people in New Orleans, which is a relatively small city. There were over 7,000 people in our local jail, which is just mind-boggling. And the percentages are just so out of whack with what is our normal in society. Now, it's complicated why that number was so high. It has to do with some state prisoners. It has to do with the fact that there really wasn't a public defender system to sort of push back on that before Katrina. But one of the biggest driving forces for that huge jail was money bond and cash bonds. And the fact that whether you got in or out of jail just had to do with whether you had money in your pocket. And it had nothing to do with whether you were dangerous, whether you're going to run to flee to a different country. It was just straight money. And we saw that even when we started our new office at the Orleans Public Defender's Office, which is sort of turned back some of the problems pre-Katrina and really started to have like a dedicated, committed public defender office that was going to fight for equal resources, to fight for clients from the day they get arrested, push for them to get out of jail, investigate their cases, all the things that a public defender office should do. But when I first got there, we were regularly seeing on just small amounts of drugs, where in other states you would just say, okay, we're going to give you your court date for this drug arrest. You would sit in jail for over 2 months on a $10,000 cash bond just because you couldn't come up with $1,200, $1,300. How did that happen? It happened because now it is part of just sort of the DNA of the city that it's not fair to keep someone in jail just because they don't have money. It's just a normal, it's part of newspaper articles, it's part of what policy deciders are saying, politicians are saying, council members. And that's not by accident. That's a lot of hard work. In the Safety and Justice Challenge, it sort of mandates that every stakeholder in the system has to come together to with the goal of reducing jail size and improving equity in criminal justice system, reducing racial bias. And so, over the last few years, in both creating the goals and the initiatives from the MacArthur Safety and Justice Challenge, and actually implementing them, it's forced people to be in rooms that wouldn't be otherwise in the room together. It forces the stakeholders to engage, even to engage with outside non-stakeholders, like community groups, with former clients, with families, with victim groups, and so it has been a sort of a 3+ year conversation that I think has led to really significant jail size reduction. Well, I think part of it is just changing the narrative of what people's expectations are, right? And so before OPD got on the scene, it was just normal for someone with a little bit of cocaine to get a $10,000, or who alleged to have a little bit of cocaine to have a $10,000 bond. Well, now the sort of the narrative that's unfair, right? And that person should be presumed released rather than detained, or without, unless they have some compelling reason to get released. So it's like switched the story. And so how did that happen? I think it happened due to, a strong public defender office that was more resourced than before. It happened because we were telling our clients stories in articles and presses and press releases and radio stories, and everywhere you look, there is some sort of attention to injustice in New Orleans, and I think that's not by accident. And probably the most important part of that is, getting to where clients and their families are, right? So this isn't some abstract conversation about jail size when it's your mother or your father or your brother. It's someone who's the breadwinner of the house. It's your loved one. So one thing that is, wasn't there before the OPD was there, and was pre-Katrina, there was just no real working with, organizations that provide drug treatment, these grassroots organizations that help folks who need housing or mental health treatment. And so we've partnered with each of those entities. And so it is just sort of a regular course of our business to say, oh, here's someone who needs mental health treatment. Let's connect them to that service. We even have staff members, jumping through all these hoops to go from point A to point B. If someone's lost their Medicaid, getting them the Medicaid so they can get to the treatment, or if they're about to lose their housing, working with both the entity and the client to make sure that they keep their housing, and then bringing that to the judge. So just part of our sort of normal workday culture is connecting people to partner community organizations to get them the services they need. And I think that percolates out to the community, because people see that, someone's going to be at this outpatient or inpatient treatment center when they could be in jail, right? And so when the community partner sees that and that's working, when their family, the person who's getting the treatment, sees that and then getting treatment for something they need treatment for, I think it just percolates to sort of, again, changing this conversation. It makes a difference to me that you're out of jail and that you're getting, that I can connect you with services that you might need to support you, or or you may not need services, like just I'm going to work my butt off just to get you out of jail because you're presumed innocent. You may or may not have done it, and that's for another day. It's really about having that right culture of a public defender office, and you see it. So many of the partners in the Safety and Justice Challenge have that culture, and I think that's where you're seeing the success is in part because of these public defender offices that have, that aren't going to just stop at like, oh, my job is just to go to court and make sure your constitutional rights are, that are protected, right? Which is sort of the bare minimum, right? But no, I'm going to like do what I can to get you out of jail, to get you connected with any services that may or may not need, to really just do everything I can for you as a person, right? And one of the things that's I think important to sort of our culture of our public defender office is that it's that we're partnering with our clients, and we're in this together with you. We're trying to protect you through this usually horrible journey, and we're going to do this together. You and me, client, and our support team are going to do this together as a partnership. Continuing to tell the story of, the client not that long ago was in jail for 53 days for a stupid fight that he and his friend got into, where the friend clearly didn't want to pursue the charges, said it was, it's let bygones be bygones, and he sat because he couldn't have $500 in jail for 53 days. The case get thrown out, and everyone knew it was going to be thrown out, but just because he didn't have $500, he's in a cage, a human being in a cage for 53 days. And this is a guy who had a full job, married. There's no common sense reason for him to be sitting there for 53 days. It's just straight inequity, straight treating someone who has money differently than someone who doesn't have money. I think the next step is the community to get involved to keep their elected leaders accountable, right? And so, demanding changes in how the laws are written, demanding changes in how the laws are executed, and where in Louisiana, judges and prosecutors are elected, and so I think that is demanding some accountability from all parts, and ourselves included. It's for everyone to demand accountability for the people that that represent them, and so I think that's a big step for community involvement. I think holding people accountable for the day-to-day ordinary injustice. So like when there is someone who is sitting in jail just because they can't make a $500 bond, that everyone knows about it. That it's not just sort of something that happens behind closed doors or just this like people are easy to ignore. Somehow figuring a way to share that injustice, the ordinary injustice around. So I think that's a combination of holding stakeholders in the criminal justice system accountable, and then also sort of kind of in as much real time as possible, building awareness in real time in justice, and just keep having participation in rooms where they weren't normally invited, right? Like having in our Safety and Justice Challenge, there's a couple of great folks who they're not lawyers, they're not judges. They just are part of the community that want to see a better, more sane system, and they're having them there keeps everyone honest, and really has a powerful voice. One of the benefits of our participation in the Safety and Justice Challenge has been adding a few more resources for pushing to get people out of jail. And so I really, both from its very core of our office and how when we have over 7,000 people in our local jail, to getting the numbers to where they are today with the MacArthur Safety and Justice Challenge, it's not appreciated, I think, and obviously the Safety and Justice Challenge appreciates it, but it's folks should, I think, fully comprehend how much having a public defenders there early, right when you get there, as early as possible, to advocate for you, to help push you to get out, to call your family, to connect you with services. There's so much that we do in our everyday level of work that is getting us to be having a more just and safe community and during those jail size. numbers down. So, I think in some ways it's preaching to the choir to everyone at this meeting and NLADA how important the public defender is in the process. But I think it should be sort of known sort of far and wide how a small investment in the public defender office brings big returns for the community, big returns for the clients, a healthier, safer community, and frankly saves government and cities lots of money, right? In just getting the jails, if you do the math, it costs about $100 a day to keep someone locked up at our local jail. And probably that's not even enough because it's still not safe enough, and but even at that bare bones $100 a day, if you do the math and reduce the jail size 100 people, that's over $3.5 million a year. That's a lot of money, right? And when you do the math, when you get to where we were when we even started the Safety and Justice Challenge to where we were last week at 1215, you're in the $15–20 million mark that should be reinvested in our community to make people healthier, safer, more prosperous. Getting down to 1215 and that jail size is where it is great strides, and it wouldn't have happened without having all the stakeholders get together, having the Safety and Justice Challenge. But frankly, 1215 is still way too high, right? And so, if we were to have people in jail that were not a risk to the community or themselves, and then that number would be much, much lower.